Hello and welcome to English 2450 Com 2010 Intro to Film, Week 4 Lighting, video number 3 on lighting styles. So this is the last video for this week. It's going to be a brief one. I'm just going to talk about a couple different styles that are used commonly in Hollywood films in terms of how the lighting is arranged. So here I have the last slide of our Prezi, which is broken down into 3 important lighting styles: 3-point lighting, high-key lighting, and low-key lighting. Now, 3-point lighting uses 3, obviously, different points of direction from which the light comes. So you have a key, a fill, and a backlight for each major figure being lit in a given scene. This is a standard lighting method used in photography, in film, in television, for CGI, etc. So for obviously animation like CGI, 3-point lighting is recreated using kind of computer software, but the basic idea remains the same, that you have light coming from 3 different directions, the key and the fill, like I talked about in the last video, the key being the dominant light, the fill being the fill-in light that kind of softens some of the shadows, and the backlight being a light kind of in the background for each major figure. Now, when I say for each major figure, what I mean is that the lighting arrangement is set up for each different individual being filmed. So if you're filming a conversation between 2 people, the 3-point lighting would be for character 1 and character 2. They would each have their own kind of lighting rig set up. So there is a diagram here on the Canvas page for clips, links, and images. And this is an image of what 3-point lighting setup looks like. So you have the object being filmed, your character, the set, whatever it happens to be. The key light being the brightest and primary light, the fill light, which kind of fills in and softens some of the shadows, and the backlight, which is typically, behind the object. So you would have this same setup of 3-point lighting for the major objects being filmed in a given shot. And also, you would have to have a different lighting setup for different camera angles as well. So if you wanted to move from a camera angle over here to a camera angle over here, you might have to move these lights around so that you don't accidentally get one of the lighting rigs in the shot. So it starts to show how truly complicated it can be to light a scene when you imagine that you have to have this rig set up for each major object being filmed for a single shot, a single take, and then you have to have the lights in different positions based on where the camera may or may not be located. So this really has to be kind of scientifically and technically plotted out so that the camera doesn't accidentally get one of the lighting rigs in the shot, so that the light is kind of even and correct, and so that all of the major objects are fully lit. So standard 3-point lighting is pretty commonly used for film, in CGI and animation, and for photography as well. So another important lighting style is high key, which is in contrast to low key. And students often have a very hard time remembering high key and low key because they are essentially the opposite of what they sound like. High key lighting is an overall lighting design that uses a fill light and a backlight to create low contrast between the brighter and the darker areas. Low contrast, a more even lighting across the board. High key sounds like it means high contrast, and low key sounds like it means low contrast. But they're really opposites, right? High key equals low contrast, and low key equals high contrast. Low key lighting creates strong contrast, sharp shadows. The lighting is hard, and the fill light is lessened or eliminated, and it creates extremely dark regions and extremely light regions within the image. So the important thing to remember for a high and low key is that they sound like the opposite of what they are. High key equals low contrast, and low key equals high contrast. So let's look at a couple examples here to help clarify what I mean. High key lighting, I have a couple examples here. High key lighting is evenly lit throughout and there are no dark spots within the frame. This image from Hero is a good example of high key lighting. You'll see that everything is very even, very bright. There are no dark shadows or unevenly lit areas. Another example of a high-key lighting situation in film is from The Wizard of Oz. Everything is very bright, very even. You do get some loss of detail in the background where it's a bit darker, but for the most part, this is all very bright and even. There aren't meant to be a lot of dark shadows, and the difference between the brightest area and the darkest area is kind of a small matter of degrees. So this is what we call high-key lighting. High key equals low contrast, minimal contrast, very evenly lit. Now, low key lighting is high contrast. The difference between the darkest darks and the brightest whites is a very sharp difference. You have a lot of dark shadows. It's very contrasty, for lack of a better word. There's a lot of contrast between dark and bright. So this is an image from Casablanca. It's an example of low-key lighting with a very strong contrast. And another example, this time from a color film, of low-key lighting is taken from the film Fight Club. The very, very bright areas, like this fluorescent lighting in the background, versus the very, very dark areas, like this background where you can't even see anything of the set. You have no idea really where this is taking place. This is an example of low key or high contrast. The contrast between the darkest dark and the whitest white is a very strong, very high contrast. This is low key. Now, the reason why I showed an example from a black and white film and a color film is to clarify that high key and low key don't necessarily have anything to do with color, but more specifically with the style of lighting used. Not all black and white films are low key. A lot of black and white films are high key, very evenly lit films. And a lot of color films can also be low key films as well. This particular example from Casablanca is when we're starting to get more into film noir, which typically uses low-key lighting to show the contrast between dark and light for thematic reasons, to really draw our attention to those shadows, those mysteries. But just keep in mind that low-key versus high-key isn't necessarily connected to color. It's more connected to the style of lighting being used. So these are the three important lighting styles to keep in mind as we move forward in the class. 3-point lighting, which uses a key, a fill, and a backlight for each major figure. This is very even lighting. This would be an example of high key lighting. High key lighting meaning low contrast, minimal shadows, very kind of even and smoothly lit. And low key lighting meaning high contrast, sharp, dark shadows, hard lighting, minimal fill light, and very, very dark and very, very light regions in contrast to each other. So keep all of this in mind as we watch this week's film, The Maltese Falcon. Think about how it uses lighting to tell the story, to enhance the visual design, to show us what we need to see, and to obscure what we're not yet meant to see. So please keep all of these things in mind as we move forward. Thanks for sticking around for video number 3, and I will see you all in class on Wednesday.